A dictator is gone, but democracy has not arrived. What if removing a president does not give a country its future back? What if power changes hands, but legitimacy does not? I am Fareed Zakaria, and what just happened in Venezuela forces us to confront a hard truth. Last week, US forces stormed Caracas. They arrested Nicolás Maduro. His rule ended in a single night. Yet today, Venezuela still does not know who truly governs. The opposition says the answer is obvious. Maria Corina Machado claims her coalition has a mandate. She says the people already chose. She says the country belongs to those who won the election. The United States removed Maduro, but Washington did not hand power to the opposition. Instead, an interim leader tied to the old regime was installed. And that is the contradiction. Regime change without democratic transfer. Force without legitimacy. Victory without recognition. If you want to understand why revolutions fail, why transitions stall, and why democracy is harder than it looks, stay with me. This is not just about Venezuela. It is about how power works in the 21st century. And to understand this moment, we must first ask a basic question. What exactly is the real problem at the center of Venezuela today? At first glance, this looks simple. A dictator is removed. An opposition steps forward. A transition should follow. But Venezuela is not facing a leadership problem. It is facing a legitimacy problem. Who has the right to rule? The opposition points to the election. They say the vote was clear. They say the people spoke. The United States points to stability. It removed Maduro, but it did not choose his successor from the opposition. Instead, it backed an interim authority from inside the old system. That creates two competing claims, one based on votes, the other based on power. One speaks the language of democracy. The other speaks the language of control. And when those two collide, countries do not transition smoothly. They freeze. They fracture. They drift into uncertainty. To understand why this keeps happening, why elections alone were not enough, we need to go back before the arrest, back before the troops, back to how Venezuela's system was built to survive moments like this. To understand this crisis, we have to understand the system it comes from. Venezuela did not collapse overnight. Its institutions were slowly hollowed out. Elections continued, but trust disappeared. Power concentrated, checks weakened, loyalty replaced law. Over time, the state stopped serving citizens and started protecting itself. That is how disputed elections happen. That is how parallel claims emerge. In 2024, the opposition rallied behind a substitute candidate, Edmundo González. Vote tallies released by the opposition showed a landslide, but the Electoral Council was controlled by loyalists. They declared Maduro the winner. Two realities were born. On the same night, one recognized by voters and allies abroad, the other enforced by institutions at home. This is the cycle of modern authoritarianism. Lose legitimacy, maintain control, survive not by consent, but by endurance. So when Maduro was removed, the system did not disappear. It adapted, and that adaptation explains why Venezuela now faces its first real crisis of transition. The first shock came fast. US special forces breached Venezuelan security. They moved through Caracas. They arrested Nicolás Maduro. They detained his wife. In one night, a regime that survived sanctions, elections, and international pressure collapsed. The world watched. Supporters celebrated. Markets reacted. Exiles dared to hope. But inside Venezuela, something else happened. Nothing moved. The bureaucracy stayed. The ministries stayed. The security forces stayed. And within hours, a familiar figure emerged. Delcy Rodriguez, a former vice president, a loyalist, a sanctioned official. She was sworn in as interim leader. This was not a transition. It was a substitution. Maduro was gone. But the system remained. If this moment feels unsettling, it should, because it reveals a deeper truth about modern power. Removing the man does not dismantle the machine. If you want to understand why this moment matters and why it may shape what comes next, stay with me. Because the real story is not the arrest, it is what survived it. To see what survived, we have to look beneath the headlines. Power in Venezuela does not live in elections. It lives in structures, in councils, in ministries, in the security apparatus. For years, the system was designed to outlast leaders. Presidents became replaceable. Institutions did not. That is why removing Maduro did not create a vacuum. The machinery already knew how to keep running. An interim leader from inside the system was not an accident. It was a safeguard, a way to signal continuity, a way to calm elites, a way to keep control without chaos. This is the hidden mechanism of modern authoritarian states. They prepare for disruption. They expect pressure. They plan for removal. And when it happens, they absorb the shock instead of breaking. That is why legitimacy alone is not enough. Votes can win elections, but systems decide transitions. And this is where the opposition's challenge becomes clear. Winning the vote did not mean winning the state. And that tension is about to explode again. The second crisis did not arrive with soldiers. It arrived with words from Washington. The United States confirmed Maduro was gone, but it stopped there. No endorsement, no recognition, no handover. President Trump praised the operation. He thanked the troops. He spoke of justice. Then he dismissed the opposition's leader. She does not have the support. She does not have the respect. Those words changed everything. In one moment, the opposition lost momentum. International allies hesitated. Inside Venezuela, confusion deepened. The interim government claimed authority. The opposition claimed legitimacy. And the military stayed silent. This is the most dangerous phase of any transition. When no side feels defeated, when no side feels secure, when power floats without an anchor, history shows us what happens next. Stalemate, fragmentation, or worse. And now, the crisis is no longer abstract. It is personal, because this uncertainty falls hardest on ordinary people. If you are Venezuelan, this moment is exhausting. You were told to wait. You were told to endure. You were told change was coming. Then Maduro was arrested. Hope surged. For a moment, it felt real. And then, nothing. No clarity. No certainty. No new beginning. You watch leaders argue about legitimacy. You hear foreign governments debate strategy, but your life stays frozen. You still wonder who makes decisions. You still ask who protects you. You still fear what tomorrow brings. This is the hidden cost of unresolved transitions. Not chaos, not celebration, but paralysis. If this story feels familiar, it is because millions of people live through it quietly. If you want voices like yours to matter in moments like this, stay engaged. Pay attention. Share this conversation, because when power is undecided, silence always helps. The strongest side What happens in Venezuela does not stay in Venezuela. Every major power is watching, not for ideals, for signals. The United States showed it can remove a leader without installing a successor. That message travels. Allies study it. Rivals learn from it. For authoritarian governments, the lesson is clear. Prepare your system, not your leader. For opposition movements, the lesson is harsher. Winning elections may not be enough. Legitimacy without leverage can disappear overnight. This moment also reshapes how interventions are judged, not by what they remove, but by what they leave behind. A frozen transition creates instability beyond borders. Markets hesitate, migration accelerates, regional trust erodes, and globally, the meaning of democracy becomes less certain. If power can change without consent, and consent can exist without power, then the rules themselves are no longer clear. And when rules dissolve, the future becomes dangerous. From here, Venezuela faces three possible futures. The first is the hopeful one. The interim authority steps aside. A negotiated transition begins. The opposition is allowed to lead. Institutions slowly rebuild trust. This path is fragile, but it restores meaning to the vote. The second future is more likely. The system absorbs the shock. The interim government stays. The opposition is sidelined, but not crushed. Life continues in a state of uncertainty, not a dictatorship, not a democracy, just suspension. The third future is the darkest. The stalemate hardens. Rival claims escalate. The military is forced to choose. Order is restored at the cost of legitimacy. History tells us this is how hopes die quietly. Which path Venezuela takes depends on one thing: not courage, not speeches, but whether power and legitimacy can finally meet. Until then, the country remains between endings and beginnings. Venezuela teaches us something uncomfortable. Removing a ruler is not the same as building a democracy. Power can fall quickly. Legitimacy cannot. In the modern world, systems matter more than moments. Elections matter. Courage matters. But without control of institutions, victory remains symbolic. This is why transitions fail. Not because people do not want change, but because structures resist it. For Venezuela, the question is no longer who won the past, it is who will shape the future. And for the rest of us, the lesson is broader. Democracy is not a switch. It is a process, one that requires patience, pressure, and constant attention. If you want to understand how power really works, stay with me. Follow this series. Share this conversation, because what happens after the cameras leave is where history is decided, and the next chapter has already begun.